Hello and welcome to ET Studios. This session has been powered by Kyndryl India. We have with us Saket Verma, Country Practice Leader Security, Kyndryl India, Girish Dixit, CISO of Kotak Securities, and Jacxine Fernandez, VP Information Security, Bangalore International Airport, sharing their insights on cybersecurity in critical infrastructure operations. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us here today, Saket, Jacxine and Girish. Thank you so much. So Jacxine, I will start with you here. So first and foremost, a very universal question, but very specific as well. What are some of the key challenges, resilience challenges that happen in critical infrastructure operations?
Thank you very much, Shantheri, and thank you for having me here. I would like to just clarify that I'm speaking in a personal capacity and not representing my organization. Coming back to your question on the critical challenges, I think on critical infrastructure, some of the challenges that are well known are usually about the aging infrastructure that has been put into place. So some of them as old as 20 years old, 30 years old, and this is absolutely aging infrastructure at a time put in when security was not one of the key criteria for determination. And many of these systems happen to be interdependent. So a failure in one part has a cascading effect in other areas and bring along with it the supply chain risks, because sometimes these 20, 30-year-old OEMs who put these systems, some of them don't exist, and some of them don't have the capability to fix these systems that are so old. And along with that, if as cybersecurity professionals, we know that we have a cybersecurity talent dearth. Imagine how much more it gets compounded when you're talking about cybersecurity challenges, talent in the critical infrastructure dearth. So I think all of these things, and combined together kind of present a very physical impact, because most of these are in critical infrastructures, moving things. So a very physical result beyond just the data breach and a loss of data or a ransomware is felt. So there is a real risk of injury or loss of life. So I think these are some of those areas that presents itself as challenges in critical infrastructure.
Sure. So Girish, I'm drawing you in here. Repel versus recover. That's a universal dilemma. So when it comes to cybersecurity budgets, what is the priority? Is it to bounce back or look at endpoint measures as something that you would want to focus on? What is the take there?
So first thing which I would like to state here is that what I'm saying here are my personal views and not something which my organization would represent or would subscribe to. I'm putting my views as a cybersecurity practitioner and not the organization that I represent. I think it's a pretty catch-22 kind of a situation, right? Because today, if you look at the kind of threat surface what we get exposed to, right? That threat surface has actually expanded multifolds. So when I am planning or a recovery and a resilience sort of a scenario, I have to strike a balance. My endpoints are definitely important because those are the ones which are involved in serving my end customers. At the same time, I have to be pretty cognizant in terms of how many endpoints or what is the kind of the baseline which I need to maintain so that I'm able to deliver on customer and my regulatory expectations without compromising on any of my deliverables. So if you look at it, it goes hand in hand. I wouldn't say that I would prioritize an endpoint before anything else, or I would prioritize a recovery over an endpoint, because endpoint is involved in every census, right? So today, gone are the days where we had a primary and a disaster recovery kind of a approach. Today we are operating at active approach, because we operate in a segment, or if you are operating in a segment which is time sensitive, which doesn't really tolerate any of an outages, active is a way forward to go, right? So most of these critical segments which are time bound and which can't really tolerate any of a latency have moved from a primary and a DR to active. Most of the endpoints are today built in with resilience. That is, if X endpoint gets impacted, we definitely have an alternate, which is, I would break it from a resilience perspective of IT recovery to a business recovery. So both the aspects are considered when you are building your infrastructure. So the balance is already there, right? Because you cannot really alienate one part from the other. Those are pretty much coexistent, and today the strategies are defined in such a way that you have the right capacity available to deliver your customer and regulatory obligations even in a crisis kind of a situation. So that's how things are balanced thanks to the technology that is available with us. I know the kind of challenges that Jacxine faces, right? But with our environment, I think we are a bit fortunate enough where we can strike this balance and maintain these levels at I would say at a baseline or a bare minimum level, which helps us to meet the customer and the regulatory obligations for us.
Sure. So that's an interesting point. I would perhaps also want to hear from Jacxine, but I will circle back to you around that. Saket, I'm drawing you into the discussion here. So Girish expostulated, and so did Jacxine, and they said some context around what are some of their problem statements, right? So how is Kyndryl exactly kind of going about, bolstering cybersecurity protocols at the critical infrastructure institutions? So what exactly is the kind of observation you've made, and what are the insights, and what is the action plan that you dole out?
Yeah, thanks, Shantheri, for having me. So so the key thing in cybersecurity is to understand that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So we know infrastructure well, and we have grown with the way infrastructure has evolved down the decades. That's one. So that's a point. That's a question of a scale, right? Then we also understand various industries like BFSI, travel, transport, technology, etc. That's a question of a scope. And all these two comes primarily from having a global footprint, because we work across continents, across so many countries. So scale, scope, and a perspective on how the technology debt has, is playing out, how technologies have evolved is a prerequisite to solve the problem. Now cybersecurity, the key thing has been, unlike many other aspects of information technology, this is very federated in nature, and the solutions themselves are very federated. So if you look at the OEMs, you will find around 100 plus OEMs which play a very important part, just manner of speaking. Second, this federated landscape of cybersecurity solutions and challenges is also mutating very fast. So what is a challenge in 2024 might not be in 2026 because of the bad actors. So we at Kyndryl have to follow the arc of what the bad actors are doing, at the same time putting in methodologies which are dynamic and which prioritize as per the client requirements and the nuanced nature of the client's landscape, what would suit them, because as you asked Girish some time back, we have to prioritize because the resources are limited, the budgets are limited, the time is limited, and above all the skills are limited. So then it comes about smart prioritization, and from our collective knowledge of what I just said, how do we tailor make a solution and a strategy for our clients?
Absolutely. Well stated. So, Jacxine, just as I was kind of curiously asking Girish, what is your take on the priorities? And given the kind of high criticality of and the scale of the operations that you face on a day-to-day basis, where is the priority? Is it a bounce back thing? Is it about endpoint? Where are the budgets really swinging?
So, without talking specifically about my organization, I think this is a very fluid decision to take, because what could be a priority this year could be different next year. So essentially, I think all of us as cybersecurity practitioners, what we follow is try to do effective risk management. So where are these threats coming from, and which at a particular given point in time, where are these threats targeting? So is it targeting my endpoint? Is it targeting somewhere else? So these kind of help us determine, and we should be actually nimble enough to be able to pivot from these kind of positions. So I think the risk profile and the sector that an organization operates in are going to be critical input parameters to decide whether. So I completely agree with Girish. It's not a repel versus recover, it's a repel and recover. But the question is about where do I put my resources? Like both Saket and Girish have said, I have finite resources. So where do I put those resources in? Where do I prioritize today? And then tomorrow I'll have to do that, song and dance. So there are, the arguments for the repel being that, if you prevent the entry of the threat actor, and if you are able to, stop them, then you don't have to deal with the recover part of it. At the same time, because in critical infrastructure, like we previously discussed, it's an aging infrastructure, so maybe we'll have to look at something on the perimeter side of things, because the infrastructure itself will not be able to take on some of the newer protection technologies that we want to put in. Third thing, an argument could be, if there is data expel, do we have some sort of a data loss prevention in place so that people are not able to take this out? Again, it doesn't touch the critical infrastructure at its asset level, but maybe more at a network level. Similarly, on the recover side of things, I mean, the universal truth is that no system is 100% secure. You're going to, it's like they say in our field, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So if that is the case, then that recovery investments have to be made in this critical infrastructure so that you're able to recover from these things. And the idea is recover quicker. If we believe in that ambit, how do I recover quicker, bounce back, get the business up? Because this is business grounds to a standstill kind of thing. So I think this is my take on the repel and recover rather than the business.
Absolutely. So it's not like one pitted against the other, it's more one working in tandem with the other, right? So the two ideas basically. Great point. So Girish, once again, what and in what ways are you looking at staying ahead of all the potential threats? I mean, how does one work on towards this?
So there are multiple facets to it, right? It's not a single dimensional kind of an approach, but it's a multi-dimensional approach, right? One, of course, you got to continuously assess yourself. As I spoke earlier when I was part of a panel as well, right? There's a plethora of technology and technology solutions which we implement, right? But what we need to focus on is to really assess the efficacy of the controls that have been implemented. Because over a period of time, what we implemented a year back may not be relevant a year down the line, right? Because the threat landscape has been changing, the threat vectors have changed, and so has the threat actors have changed, right? So continuously testing your controls for the efficacy. And when I'm doing this, I have to keep in mind that I have to be cognizant of the current threat landscape, and I also have to consider what could be the future threats that can impact my organization and that can impact my business functions as well, right? That's the first aspect. I think the second aspect, what we need to keep in mind is we need to have, and I think this is not just CISO who needs to drive it, but it has to be driven at the organization level, where you need to effectively understand what are those key functions that no matter what situation you are in, that we need to keep functional, right? Like say for example, I am a customer facing organization, right? I need to have my online portals, my mobile applications always available, because if they are not available, it's a direct business, a regulatory and a customer impact. So that prioritization has to be done. You need to understand in what order I should be planning my recovery, because if you don't know what and when things should be recovered, you are doing a pretty bad job at it, right? So that is how you need to kind of continuously assessing your controls, playing out the scenarios in form of say a tabletop kind of an exercise where what you have on paper becomes a muscle memory for you. So in a crisis situation, you don't be looking like, okay, what should I do now? You're not looking for answers. It's part of your muscle memory. You just execute it. So plan for those kind of scenarios, testing, simulations, and most importantly, clearly prioritize what are the critical business processes and in what order they have to be recovered. That's how you will be able to, I won't say be ahead of the adversaries, right? Because it's like a police and a cop and a thief kind of a game, right? Where they are the ones who adopt the technology first, then we play a catch up. But we are at least in a position that if anything strikes me, I am confident that I would be able to minimize its impact and recover in a swift time. So that's how the planning needs to happen, and that's what will make you resilient organization, and that's what will reduce any or help you absorb any impact of any cyber threat impacting or kind of targeting your organization.
Absolutely, very critical in the era of multiple touch points, in the era of the omni-channel,
Absolutely.
and also the criticality of giving superlative CX, right?
And the
Regulators are after
yeah,
you.
regulators are after us. We all are regulator entities. The threat landscape changes, the threat surface changes, the priorities also change. Then there's an aspect of supply chain as well. Because today I'm engaging with experts, and I'm sure Saket would agree to that, right? As the ecosystem changes, your supply chain risk also changes. It has to be continuously kind of tested, I would rather say attested for efficacy of the controls.
Absolutely. So, Saket, drawing you in again. So, what are some of the proof of the pudding is generally the use cases. So, what are some of those examples where Kyndryl solutions have helped customers or organizations to really kind of safeguard their critical infrastructure? So, if you could give us some examples, please.
Yeah, so the way we approach clients, and each client has its own individual nuances. So I would say three things. One is you engage with the client from a consult and assurance service perspective to understand where is the client on the cybersecurity maturity curve, and do the baselining and focus on the what I call the brilliant basics. Is the patching being done? Are the endpoints secured? Is the server infrastructure secured? Is the basics being done? And believe me, a lot of times you find this because of the scale of the organization, these are not being done the way they should be. Now, this is like we need to have our fitness in place because you have to jog every day. It's easier said than done. From these assessments that we also undertake, let's say cyber resiliency maturity assessment. So CRMA is a structured assessment, for organization on where are they and what are the gaps. Now, there are many other different kinds of assessments on different sub-domains of cybersecurity. Now, what they point us towards are certain initiatives that the organization should be taking. For example, let's say a zero trust initiative, or what we call a regulatory readiness initiative. Let's say we have the DPDP Act coming in, so a lot of organizations will have to prepare themselves for that. So there's a portfolio of initiatives which any organization must be focusing on at any point of time. Now, the catch here is, unlike two decades back, when a manufacturing organization, for example, had a TQM or a total quality initiative, which went on a ISO initiative for decades, and there was not much change. Here, the paradigm itself changes. So I might be doing a zero trust initiative for a couple of years, but then I might have to finish it in a very different direction because the bad actors and the threat vectors and the threat surface and the whole paradigm changes. So change is one of the key things in cybersecurity one has to be. The other thing, I think, how we are tackling the challenge, and this is very specific to Kyndryl, I think we are leading the way, is platformization of services. We will have to platformize our services, which we are doing. We have the Kyndryl Bridge, we have AIOps platforms, and within cybersecurity, we have something called SOAP, Security Operations as a platform, where you can not only leverage the scale of various clients, but also cross-pollinate the best practices, the run books, etc., across the world, and see what's happening, because cybersecurity transcends boundaries. So these are some of the initiatives and some mental gigs which both from a vendor side, from a client side, from a regulator side, everybody will have to psych themselves up, because the bad actor is trying to outwit us and we have to outwit them, right? So it's so this is not a regular, normal in IT industry, kind of a sprint that we are running. It is something which is, thought process itself, starts with disruption and how to avoid that disruption.
Absolutely. So, which is in keeping with the catchphrase, together we reinvent cybersecurity, right? So I think great insights. I think there should be greater synergies between the various stakeholders at the end of it, because this cannot become anybody's personal problem, right? So thank you so much, Saket, Jacxine and Girish. That was a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.